Jesus showed up in tangible ways, and just the friendship and prayers and support made us feel so rich and so wealthy. That had nothing to do with money, which was kind of crazy, realizing that we were at some of the most poor, desperate places in our lives financially, but we had gained so much because of the people and their response to just loving us no matter what.
Have you ever been in a conversation where you can tell the other person isn't listening? It happens all the time. We all need to grow in our listening skills, especially when it comes to faith-based conversations.
Jesus had this teaching. He'd often say, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." Jesus can actually teach us how to listen to him and to others so that people become curious about who he is. Ears to Speak is about inspiring spiritual curiosity through listening.
We're your hosts, Madison Bertunis
and Jessica Leapfick.
Today, Jessica, you're going to be sharing a little bit about your story.
Yeah.
And growing up in church, a lot of our listeners probably have heard the word testimony.
Yes.
And when we hear that word testimony, we think about going way back to like when you were a kid and you went to camp.
At the bonfire, the speaker said every person close their eyes and raise their hand to accept Jesus. And
right.
Yeah.
Or you go down to the quote, quote, altar, the altar call, and you accept Jesus into your heart. And then you, in explaining your testimony, you go through like
the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Right.
And it just turns into this long, drawn out, like this is my life story.
Right.
Which
big.
That can be good in certain circumstances in conversation. It can be good to share your quote, quote, testimony.
Yes.
But
the reality is not a lot of us have time, spaces, or even I would say venues where that can be shared.
Yeah, or the energy. Like,
you're right.
To sit down and be like,
tell me your
I'm
going
to delve out my life story to you.
Sure.
Like, that's exhausting.
Yeah, yeah. And it's got to be with the right kind of person, too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we talk a lot about, at Stonecroft, the story of now.
Right.
Which is actually a resource that you came up with, Jessica. Mm-hmm. And I love this because the story of now is all about sharing with your friends what Jesus has done in your life right now.
Hence the name, Story of Now.
But I think the story of now can kind of zoom out of your life and even what's going on right now and point to one time.
Yeah.
One defining moment in your faith.
Yeah.
And just talk about that one thing.
Yeah.
Versus talking about the whole thing. Let's just talk about one thing.
Right.
That has really defined our faith. And let's dive into that a little bit deeper because we're not focusing on the whole thing. We can focus on one thing. So I love that. So my question for you today, as you talk about part of your story, is what has been a defining moment or defining time in your faith?
Yeah. There's been a lot of defining moments, but I can think specifically of 2010 when my family and I moved to Cleveland, Ohio. And we fell hard in love with the city of Cleveland. And a lot of people might think, what? Like, that sounds crazy. But we had been kind of stopping there to visit friends for a number of years on our way to upstate New York to visit my husband's family. And every time we went there, we were like, this place is magical. Like, it had all these gorgeous Art Deco architectural buildings. And you just get a sense of the city's rich history. And there's a great food scene there. It's on Lake Erie, which you can, just enjoy being at in the summer. So we felt like every corner we turned around when we moved there just had something beautiful and magical waiting for us. And it was incredible. So we had moved there in 2010 after kind of realizing God was inviting us to move to a different city for our jobs. And it was right after the housing crash in 2008. And we had left behind a house in the most foreclosed zip code in Michigan. We'd left behind family, which is really hard. And my son even kind of had a existential crisis at one moment, like, why did we have to move here? Like, why did we have to move away from Grammy and Papa? And I miss my cousins. And why are the walls in my bedroom white? Why can't I have blue walls in my bedroom? And we were like, dude, we can change that. Like we can get some paint and paint your walls blue. Like that is within our power. So it was this really interesting time of excitement and newness that slowly began to turn into a really, really hard situation. And the longer we lived there, the more we realized that the rental situation we had set up was not going to work out. It fell through with some of the renters we had. And we hired this rental management company to take over that just ended up totally being shady. And, we'd get like an itemized list of stuff that they were doing to, quote, fix up the house before they could rent it. And it was like $70 to change a light bulb. And so having moved, having 2 mortgages, raising money for our salaries because we were both in nonprofit ministry, just became this kind of gut-wrenching situation of like, how are we going to make this work? What is happening here? Like, are we going to be able to make it? And during that time, I got pregnant with our second son, Oswald. And so it was moving to a new city, getting pregnant, having this crazy situation with this rental company kind of cheating us out of money, like never actually ending up securing renters to pay for the mortgage. So we're becoming kind of increasingly stressed out, like what is happening here? So at the same time, we're meeting all these amazing people and just finding this incredible community of friends and feeling really welcomed and loved and accepted, and just couldn't really believe, like, wow, we just feel so rich in community and connected here. So anyways, over the course of a couple months, it just became increasingly clear that this company was shady. We kept kind of hoping, like, things are going to get better. And I remember, like, Christmas of 2010, trying to figure out how we would afford presents for our son, Reuben. He was super into Thomas the Train at the time, and he wanted the Misty Island Rescue set. And I just remember being heartbroken because we couldn't afford the $40 to get him this Misty Island Rescue set. And I remember we had bought him like some socks and underwear so we would have something to wrap up for him on Christmas. And then Dave had found this like tractor Power Wheels on the side of the road that was in perfect condition. It was really cool. It was like this John Deere Power Wheels, a little tractor with this front scoop. And all it needed was a new battery. So he got it, cleaned it up, bought a new battery, and we wrapped that up. But it was still this heartbreaking situation. Like, I remember being in my kitchen doing dishes and just crying, like, we can't even afford presents for our 3-year-old. And what has life come to in this moment? But still being grateful at the same time, like, we have a house and trusting God is going to work this out. So anyways, we get through Christmas and I'm pregnant and emotional and feeling like, man, I wish I could like afford a massage or whatever, and trying to figure out how to take care of myself without really having any sort of income to be able to do so. That was additional besides just the bare necessities. So anyways, at one point we end up going to see a financial advisor to get kind of just ask like, hey, we've got this housing situation. What do you recommend us doing? And so we go see this advisor and kind of give him the details on the situation. And we tell him like, man, we're barely keeping our heads above water here. Like, what do you recommend us doing? And I just remember him looking at us saying, you guys are not keeping your heads above water. You are drowning and barely coming up for air. This isn't sustainable. And your best option is to foreclose on your home in Michigan and declare bankruptcy. And I just remember Dave and I looking at each other like, this is actually happening to us. Like, it's one thing when you hear the stories happening in news, like this is a crisis affecting so many thousands and millions of people across the country, right. But you never think like this is going to happen to me, especially if you've grown up in families that, are pretty financially secure, have a good educational background. Neither of us had ever been really at a place in our families where we had anything. There wasn't a lot of struggle. I mean, sure, there was times when money was tight, but like our families owned homes, went on vacations, like we had good educations, all of that stuff. So, it just became this reality of like, holy crap, this is actually happening to us. And I just remember driving home from that appointment and CeeLo Green's song, Forget You, was on the radio. And that line is like, I guess the change in my pocket wasn't enough. Forget you. So I just remember looking at each other, listening to that song, and it's like, if I was richer, I'd still be with you. And we're just looking at each other like, we have nothing. Like, we have nothing. We have no savings. There's no way we can get out of this situation. Thankfully, during that time, we'd been part of this amazing church community in Cleveland, Velocity. And we were new enough in town that we just didn't really feel like we could share with people like, hey, we're going through this horrific financial crisis right now. Like we had just started making friends. And so it felt really lonely and isolating. We kind of share with them like, we're struggling right now and we're trying to sell our house in Michigan and it's just not happening. Even though they didn't know the full extent of our struggles, these friends just welcomed us in amazing ways. Like, we had friends, dinner with them regularly. And we were at a point where it was like, thank God friends are inviting us for dinner because that's one less meal we'll have to pay for this week. That's one little bit less groceries we'll have to pay for. And it just became this beautiful place of having a wealth of community that supported us even when they didn't fully know what was going on. And the college students my husband was working with, they would come over and babysit for free. And I felt so guilty, like, we can't even pay you, and I feel terrible about this. And it was incredible because I remember one of the students, Chelsea, was bringing her home back to campus once, and I was just apologizing, like, I'm really sorry we can't pay you. Like, we're pretty strapped right now. And she, I'll never forget her saying to me, actually, I've been super depressed, and coming and spending time with your son, Ruben, just reminded me there's more to life than my stress and my studies and the struggles I'm dealing with. And it was such a joy to just spend time laughing with him and playing with him. And it became just an insight that God gave me of when we invite people into our needs, often it blesses them and it helps them to see life is bigger than my problems and I'm needed and valued here in this community beyond what I can achieve or produce or whatever. So even with those hard things, it kind of sent me into a faith crisis of, God, how could you let this happen to us? Mm-hmm. We're good people, right? Like, we always pull out that line, like, we're good people. We have given our lives and have chosen the path of nonprofit ministry to serve you. And if you loved us, if you were faithful, how could you let this happen to us? And even though, like, in my mind, I knew that being a good person and sacrificing is not what makes God love you or bless you, I don't think I'd ever been in a place in my life where I'd really been faced with that reality of saying, God is faithful no matter what, in plenty and in want, and I will choose to love him and serve him even in really painful, desperate situations. And I can remember being like 7 months pregnant, not being able to sleep at night because I was so consumed with worry and fear and just wondering, like, how are we going to make it through this week? We had applied for food stamps, but were denied because we were technically like too wealthy for food stamps. And we kept just thinking the situation with our rental house in Michigan was going to get better. And so I didn't bother applying for WIC because it was like, oh, next month it's going to change. It's going to be fine. And it just never was. And so I can remember sitting up at night, just not being able to sleep and just crying and crying and crying. Like, God, how could you let this happen to us? And the words of Psalm 23 just became this anchor for me of God's faithful and he loves you no matter what. And often I would just have to repeat those words to myself as I went to bed. The Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of darkness, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I would sit up at night looking out at the streetlights, trusting and believing that goodness and mercy would follow me all the days of my life. And that if I had Jesus in my life, I actually had enough. I actually had everything I needed. And Jesus wasn't this abstract concept in Scripture. Like, he was showing up in the form of friends inviting us over for meals, offering us to babysit. Some friends sent us on a baby moon when we were close to due date for Ozzy. Like, they paid for us to spend the night in a really nice B&B and go to this marriage conference. And Jesus showed up in tangible ways. And just the friendship and prayers and support made us feel so rich and so wealthy. That had nothing to do with money, which was kind of crazy, realizing that we were at some of the most poor, desperate places in our lives financially, but we had gained so much because of the people and their response to just loving us no matter what. So summer of 2011 came, and I delivered our son Ozzy, who is just, I was so grateful for his birth and delivery, because it became the one bright spot. You know, it was one of the few bright spots that year. And it gave us something to look forward to and something to rejoice over. And even though he was born into the midst of a lot of turmoil and pain, he just became this joy and this delight in our lives. And 2 weeks after he was born, we sat in bankruptcy court listening to the stories of dozens of other people that had gotten divorces, had lost businesses, that by no fault of their own, in many ways, found themselves in the same situation as us. And I remember just sitting there thinking, there are so many people who are going through this very same thing, that are silently struggling and suffering, thinking, I'm the only one. This is so shameful. I can't tell anyone about this because people are going to think I'm stupid, I'm irresponsible, I'm foolish for making the kinds of decisions I did. And it just gave me kind of a deepened compassion for people who are in those situations, who, you know, we might look at somebody and on the surface things look fine. They have a home, they're driving a car, they have a job, whatever. But it deepened the realization of we never actually know what's going on in people's lives. Even if they look put together, they might have mountains of debt or be struggling in their marriage or going through something really painful financially. And we came out of court that day. I remember having to like nurse Ozzy in the basement of the courthouse. And it just felt like this messy, horrible situation of like, I just want to be done with this. And I remember afterwards going to our church small group, and people asked like, okay, so let's take some prayer requests and how can we pray for you? And Dave and I finally shared with our group like, hey, we just went through bankruptcy. We went through bankruptcy court. And I just remember the look on people's faces like, why didn't you tell us? Like, why didn't you tell us you were going through this? Like, we wish we could have been there for you in more ways. Just the love that they showed us and the hugs and the prayers and asking like, is there anything we can do for you? And it was incredible. And people did keep showing up and responding. Like when our fridge started to go out, we were like, how are we going to afford a new fridge? Like, we don't have money and savings to be able to do this. And our friends, Brian and Kristen, showed up and like bought us a fridge. Just crazy, amazing ways that Jesus was like, I'm here for you. I'm showing you my presence and my love through these people. Even in the brokenness, we just became profoundly, profoundly grateful and prayerful and realizing like the Lord is our shepherd. We do have everything we need if we are with him, if we're in community and showing up. You know, it was a powerful turning point in my faith to just realize, that the Lord is with me no matter what. Like he's walking with me in the dark shadows and the dark valleys. And also just to be grateful for what we do have instead of what we lack. And that has hugely shaped our faith and our life moving forward. We've really chosen to live simply and, do things like have a one-car family and live in a townhome, walk to work. We try to shop at thrift stores so that we can use the finances that God has given us now to really bless and support other people, kids in other countries, sponsoring them through compassion, serving our city through providing for needs of foster care kids, and just realizing like there's so many families and people like teetering on the brink of homelessness or not making it. And it shaped our faith to want to support other people in the silent struggles and just be open with them about the things that we've gone through so that they realize they're not alone, and that most importantly, God is with them and taking care of them even when things feel really desperate. So
Wow.
Yeah.
Jessica, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing your story.
Yeah.
There is so much to learn from what you just shared. And I'm really thankful for how beautiful that story is. And if I would have known you then, I would be like, Jessica, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. But now hearing it, however many years later, I'm not saying I'm not sorry you went through that because it's hard, but like there's so much good that came out of that. I mean, I just think about how powerful it is when you were sharing about that student who came over to babysit Ruben, who was depressed, but like you felt bad, you couldn't pair, but she was like, this is helping me through my depression. Like that is the kind of God that God is.
Yeah.
He takes where we lack and provides for somebody.
Yep.
Like that story right there in itself is incredible to me.
Yeah.
And I was sitting here wondering, well, first of all, we live in a world that says the more you have, the better.
Right.
Like get for yourself, accumulate.
Yep.
Have the bigger, the better.
Right.
But what you and your family experienced was the opposite.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm so rich in community and rich with people who love me, even though I have no monetary like value to my name.
Right.
And that just speaks volumes to our culture. But I was sitting here wondering, had you and Dave shared with your community there to the degree that with which you were struggling? I mean, you said that they knew a little bit, and people would provide meals for you or buy a fridge for you or whatever. But how might your experience have been different had you just shared this with everybody and said, like, we have nothing, we need help?
Yeah.
How do you think your situation would have been different?
That's a good question. In some ways, I think at the time I was really struggling with pride and not wanting to bring people into the situation fully because it just felt so shameful and so painful. But I think coming out of it, it made me realize when you share something you're struggling with, if you have the kind of community that responds with love and empathy and compassion, they're not looking at you thinking, you idiot. They're not thinking like,
you're weird.
You're stupid. You made dumb choices. They're thinking like, I love you and I want to support you in that. And so I think in retrospect, I wish we would have been more specific with some of our needs. Like I remember the week that I was going to deliver Ozzy, like we got in a fight in the grocery store about whether or not we should buy mushrooms. It's the stupidest thing, right?
You're like, I'm craving mushrooms.
Yeah, because I was like, I want to stock our pantry before the baby comes. And honestly, a fight over $1.25 pack of mushrooms was where we were at.
Right.
And so, I wish that I would have been more open with our community and just swallowed my pride to say like, hey, we are struggling financially to the point where it would really bless us if somebody could help us with some groceries this week. And it's hard to like say what we need because we're afraid people will reject us or be offended somehow. But
we feel like we'll be humiliated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we live in a really independent culture that's, kind of prides ourselves on not needing anything from anyone. But I think what this showed me is you bless others when you let them know what you need and invite them into your struggles.
Yeah, that's good. I think I heard somebody say recently to overcome materialism is to give. So kind of like if you struggle with materialism, the way to combat that is by giving away. Yeah. And so I think that that's true. When we allow people to help us out, which is really hard for me. Yeah. When we allow people to help us, we're actually allowing them to give. Yeah. And that brings people joy. I mean, it does. And we think that we're really inconveniencing people. Yeah. But, I asked that question because as you were sharing your story, I was thinking that in most circumstances, it's always good to share. Yeah. It's always good to be vulnerable. But I think where you all were at, I'm glad you didn't. Yeah. Because I don't think that you could have experienced that intimacy with God and that Psalm 23, He is my shepherd, in the way that you did. Like, I think that because of the incredible community that you had, they all would have stepped in. Imagine, pulled all their money together, paid your mortgage for you, bought you groceries, and I think that would be equally as cool. Yeah. Like, that would have been a huge blessing and you would have been very thankful. But I think that in our suffering, or in like the scarcity, it was where your family truly experienced Jesus coming through for you.
Yeah.
And that those little surprises of, oh, this person is inviting us over for dinner. Praise the Lord. We don't have to worry about paying for dinner tonight.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have experienced those things.
Right. Yeah, he showed up in crazy, amazing ways. Like there were times that Dave would find out like, oh, I have $300 in my PayPal account because of something I forgot I sold on eBay or whatever. And it was all these miracles time after time after time of like, our life does not make sense on paper, but Jesus is making it happen somehow.
Yeah.
And, I remember hearing this quote from C.S. Lewis that pain is God's megaphone to us of his love, his presence. And I remember just being so angry, like, I don't want this. I don't want pain to be the megaphone. I want like joy and love and like peace and all that good stuff coming through loud and clear. But the thing God kept shouting to me in the midst of my pain is, I'm with you. You have everything you need. And it just became this kind of mantra. And even now when I'm really struggling with ingratitude or jealousy or materialism, it's still been this mantra to me of the Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. And some other translations are, I shall not want. And that's equally as powerful when I look around to other people who have more than me of just saying, I shall not want because I have everything I need. And God is so good and so faithful and so loving and just keeps showing up in miraculous ways through new friends, through new things we're learning to love here in Kansas and communities. So
knowing you now, you and your family have experienced both sides of this situation. So you've experienced the bankruptcy, but you were rich in community. You've experienced being well off, but not having very much community. Right. And you kind of already shared ways that you have changed your lifestyle because of your experience. Yeah. Like you're a one-car family. Yeah. You shop at thrift stores. You shop at the cheaper grocery store. Right. I mean, like
we love Aldi. Yeah, we are Aldi fans.
And if y'all don't have an Aldi where you live,
I feel sorry for you.
You can Google it, I guess, and find out what it is. But it's a very cheap grocery store.
Yes.
But anyways, so yeah, you've experienced both sides of that situation. Yeah. And I was wondering also, are there times in your life where you wish you could go back and experience the sweetness? Because, okay, I don't know if you've heard this story, but I've heard this story about these missionaries who were overseas in a closed country, which basically means like you're not allowed to talk about Jesus. Yeah. You're not allowed to talk about your faith.
Right.
And if you do, you will be imprisoned or killed. Yeah. And these men who were missionaries in these countries were arrested and in prison and tortured. Yep. But they eventually came back to the U.S. Like they, I don't remember the exact story, but they got out of jail, they came back to the U.S. and are now living like your quote, quote, normal life, American life. But they wrote a book and they were talking about how they long to be back in jail. Yeah. Because they've never experienced the Holy Spirit and Jesus. Closeness like that. They're like, I've not experienced that again. Yeah. And so like I can't imagine longing to be back somewhere like in that situation. Sure. So do you resonate with that at all? I mean, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, actually I really struggled when we first moved here to Kansas because we moved here for a job, for me to take this job with Stonecroft, and God just provided for us like financially. I mean, we had more financial resources than we'd had in our entire lives. And I remember like being at a water park in Arkansas with our kids and some friends and looking around at just like this amazing water park in the midst of these like really nice homes and all this stuff and being absolutely like, one, guilt-stricken, like I don't deserve this. This is too nice. And two, terrified because I felt like, Lord, I know how to follow you in times of want. I know what it's like to cling to you for my every need. And I know what it's like to pray with my husband and depend on each other, realizing like, man, we're all we've got. And it felt really scary, this feeling of like, Lord, I don't know how to follow you in plenty. I don't know how to cling to you and not let all this stuff become the thing that I trust in. Not let how much money I have in my savings account be the thing I trust in. Not trusting in the fact that our kids go to a good school or what kind of home we have. And it was terrifying for me to think like, I could begin to lose my trust in Jesus, that he really is my provider and everything I need. Because I think when you have that security financially and more stuff, you can become numb and put your trust in those things as opposed to Jesus. And that's been hard. That's been really hard over the last couple of years. And still, every time we get a bill that we didn't expect, or, somebody's tooth is broken, they have to go to the dentist, I still find myself having that feeling of like, oh my gosh, like, how are we going to pay for this? And then I'm able to stop and think, thank you, Jesus, that you provided enough that a couple years ago, we would not have been able to pay this dentist bill. We would have not been able to make that car repair. So I think, it's shifted from that place of desperation and clinging to Jesus to really having to mindfully practice gratitude and saying, I have everything I need. I'm thankful for what God's given me, confessing greed and covetousness, of wanting what other people have, the vacations, the cars, the whatever, the wardrobe. And so it's really shifted my faith into a different place of being thankful, but also trying to be responsible of like, if God has given me more, how can I be responsible to bless other people with it and to care for other people and just not get caught up in the lie of the American dream of more, better,
happier,
bigger, happier.
Yeah.
I think we've just really chosen to reject that lie. Yeah. So, in some ways I do long for that intimacy with God of like just really feeling like I'm walking closely to him. But at the same time, I think he's leading me in a different path in this different time of everything you have comes from me, whether you're in plenty or want. Like, I'm the one who provides for you, and I love you no matter what. How much or how little you have doesn't reflect how much I love for you, how much I love you. And I think that's been the most profound thing. Is profoundest a real word? Profoundest? Profoundest.
It is now.
I guess we're making that a word. The most profound thing is Jesus is constant. He is faithful. I think about that song, like, he gives and takes away. My heart will choose to say, blessed be the name of the Lord. And like, I really hated that song when we were going through
I hate this song.
bankruptcy. I'm like, shut up. Like, I want more of the give than the take away, because it felt like we had everything taken away from us. Yeah, and frankly, I still don't really like that song that much. But like, it just was a good reminder of like, no matter where you're at, we can choose to say, God, you are good. God, you love me. God, you're providing for me. Help me to see the places you're showing up in life, even if it's not the ways that I want you to provide. And hopefully, that encourages you guys today as you're listening of you might be going through some stuff. It might not be the exact same situation I'm in or I was in, but we all have those places in our lives where we feel like we're desperate, where we're lacking, whether it's, waiting for a child or waiting for a spouse or waiting for a business to take off, waiting for your health to improve, that Jesus is with you. He is walking with you in those dark valleys, and he's able to provide and give you everything that you need. So I hope sharing some places in my life where that's been true just helps you to see that Jesus is with you.
Jessica, I just want to thank you again. That was really good and encouraging for me today. Awesome. And I also want to say that we have some celebrating to do this summer because...
Yes.
You want to tell our listeners why?
You
don't know where I'm going with this?
No, I don't. I have no idea.
The bankruptcy will be cleared.
You're right. Oh my gosh, that's right. I told you that.
I just happened to know that.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So I had shared this kind of the story I just shared a couple of weeks ago with a group we've been going through about storytelling. And yeah, this July, that will be cleared from our record. And so that feels like a huge celebration of like, those 7 years are done. Yeah, it is a huge celebration. So we're going to go out and max out our credit cards to celebrate. Just kidding.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. No, it does feel like a huge landmark of like this period in our lives is done. Like done.
Yeah. So if you feel like you're listening and you're like, wow, I wish I could tell my story the way that Jessica did. That was incredible. If you're interested in learning how to do that, we can teach you.
We'd love to teach you.
Yeah. It's called The Story of Now. Mm-hmm. And we also have some other resources that are great with helping you be a great storyteller about what's happened in your own life.
And how Jesus is just showing up in the midst of whatever. The grind of commuting to work, the struggle of parenting young kids, the challenges of single life or married life or that retired life.
Anything.
Although you retired folk, come on. You're going fishing. You're quilting.
Yeah,
you're
there
taking naps.
can't be anything wrong there.
I'm real jealous there.
Well,
which
if you
isn't
are
true.
interested, you can email us at connections@stonecroft.org or contact us at our Ears to Speak Facebook page. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for listening to Ears to Speak today. If you liked what you heard, please go and subscribe to our podcast, review it, share it with a friend, and we would love it.
Show us some love. And if you want to get in contact with us, if you have any questions about the show, just want to drop us an encouraging note or
a critical note.
We receive those too. We also receive cookies. You can send us an email at connections@stonecroft.org. If you want to find out more resources about how to share your faith, you can go to stonecroft.org and check that out as well. Thank you so much for listening today, and we're looking forward to connecting with you again.